together, so hopefully I don't leave you guys hanging on a bad note here. We get this thing going at the end. Like Justin said, I'm Director of Football Performance at the University of North Texas. I'm going into my second year. Before we get started on this, the very first thing you see across the front of the slide there is it says, check your ego at the door. And this is something that I really encourage all of our athletes to do, and I encourage other coaches to do it as well, because when you walk into a situation like this, you're going to be thrown a lot of information. And if you come in with a preconceived notion about the way things should be done or the way you think things should be done, you're going to prohibit yourself from learning everything you can. And so when we do these things, or when we train our athletes, we need them to check the ego at the door. I'm going to ask you guys to check your ego at the door, because there's going to be some things that might actually make the hair on the back of your neck stand up a little bit. Like, wait a minute, you do it that way or you don't do that? In Texas, I'm starting to kind of develop a reputation as being the anti-Christ of strength and conditioning, because I don't advocate Olympic movements or overhead movements or snatches, and I've had people get up and walk out of the room before in the middle of presentations because I can't listen to that, I don't want to listen to that. But check your ego at the door. Hear me out, hear what I have to say, because when a lot of people do, they kind of start to see things in a little bit different light. Excuse me. First thing I want to do is give some thanks, because I think that's extremely important. My staff, I have a tremendous staff that are overworked and way underpaid, and I couldn't do the things that we do with our football program now without these guys. Dave Trevino, Ben Jacobs, and Danny Phillips. Those guys are like my arms and legs. I can't operate without them. The athletic performance staff here, led by Brady Holt. Brady and I go back to Utah State. We've been really close friends, and it's really an honor to be able to come here and speak at his clinic. The University of North Texas, my employer, Dan McCarty, my head football coach, who in my opinion is the best head football coach in all of football. I'll never work for a better guy. If I stay in this field for 100 years, I won't work for a better guy than Dan McCarty. He's outstanding. I really appreciate the opportunity. Joe Ken, who was my initial mentor at Arizona State. Some of you guys may know who he is from tier system fame. Brady Holt, Mark Hickok, Kevin Heiberg, who was supposed to speak today. Chris Ronald, Buddy Morris, James Smith, and Thomas Linsky. Everything you see in here today is not something that came from me sitting in a corner in a dark room with books and me coming up with it on my own. I have a lot of help. I'm not very smart, all right? I'll be the first one to tell you that. Get a lot of help, get a lot of feedback and information from other people. So being able to put these things together, things that you're going to see today, is a culmination of work that a lot of other people have helped me do, and I really appreciate those people. Coaches and athletes, both past and present, who give me the opportunity to work with them. Without our athletes, we don't have jobs. We don't have the opportunity to sit here and listen to these things and get these ideas and share ideas with each other, and don't have the opportunity to go work in the field that we do and have amazing relationships with our kids and our athletes. And finally, all of you here, I appreciate you guys sticking around, and usually it's you want to shag ass out of here and get home when you've been sitting around for a long day. But I appreciate you guys sticking around and listening to what I have to say, and I hope you get something valuable from this presentation. The very first thing that I always want to ask people when we do these things is to think about why. And that should be everything. You should question everything that you look at. You pick up an article and read something, you listen to somebody speak. When I talk to our athletes, I say, I want you guys to think about why you're doing what you're doing. We don't work out in our program. We train on a day-to-day basis. Working out, anybody can go to Gold's Gym with 24-hour fitness and jump on a Stairmaster and work out. When we train with purpose. Everything we do, just like Devin was talking about, everything we do has a purpose. There's nothing that's in there that's designed to specifically gas a kid or puke a kid, or let's see if we can kill their legs today. That's not the idea behind what we're trying to do. Everything has a very specific purpose. And so we want our kids to understand why. I want you to understand why and question why. During this presentation, I say something, let's not wait until the end. Shoot your hand up and just hold it out. Whoa, what is that? I don't understand what you're talking about. Or why do you do it that way? Or why do you think that? And then we can talk about it, because usually a lot of times you wait towards the end and you don't really get those things out. So question everything. Think, well, I think Devin, you have this. A lot of matching of slides today, the thinker today, huh? So here's my call to action for you. And this quote came directly from Buddy Morris. If you limit your knowledge, you limit your athletes. And we talked a little bit about societal problems during Devin's presentation. We're talking about early specialization, and I think a lot of that comes from lack of knowledge. We live in a society today where we have the most information available. I think we can all readily agree that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the information that we have available as strength coaches was much less than it is now. You can pull up Google and get a million articles in seconds on just about anything. But we're also the most ignorant people in the profession anymore. You go and listen to, Brady and I actually went to, I think it was like the second or third CSCCA conference, and we were all fired up about dueling strength coaches, and I heard two strength coaches talk. One of them was from the SEC, the other one was from the Big 12. And this was the dialogue that went on. I see in your program, coach, I won't mention any names, but I see in your program, coach, that you guys squat your guys twice a week in the wintertime. Why do you do that? Room full of 500 professionals now, 500 CSCS certified, master's degrees. He looked at the other guy and said, well, in the wintertime, I really want to beat their legs up. And me and Brady looked at each other like, are you effing kidding me? Beat their legs up? That's the answer you gave in front of 500 professionals? That's your thought process? And we realized that there was real trouble. And so it's extremely important that you're knowledgeable. Ignorance is no excuse for it, especially in today's day and age when information is so readily available. So be knowledgeable, understand that knowledge is power. Don't be too stubborn, too stupid to change. You're like, well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, if you do what you've always done, you get what you always got. And so we've got to make changes. Set the example. If you're a coach especially, you're going to be out in front of your athletes. Make sure you're setting a great example for them. Begin good practices now and follow them there. Absorb, modify, and apply. In this presentation today, it's going to be very light on specific means. I'm going to talk to you in a very general light. The reason for that is, I don't know what your situation is. Okay, my situation is completely different from your situation. My situation at USF is completely different from the situation I walked into at UNT. Different kids, different coaches, different setup. And so for me to sit here and say, well, these are the means that I use. We clean, we squat, we bench, we do this, we do that. Might not be appropriate for you, and that would be a waste of time. Plus, we all understand those things. We know those things. So let's not talk about the particular means and specific means. Let's talk about ideas behind why we do those things. And that's what a lot of this is going to be about. And at the end, I'll show you how we do what we do. And right before we get into this, I always show this slide. I'm kind of a nerd, so I like the Matrix. And just before Morpheus freed Neo, he told him, free your mind, free your mind. Get away from thinking with inside the box. Get away from thinking about things the way you always thought about them. Think about them in a different light. So free your mind from just about everything that you've held previously true. And talking about that, I say think outside the box. So here's one thing that I see a lot of. I'll get emails all the time, especially like right around December and January. Coach, we're getting ready to go into our off season. I want to see what your workout program is. You send me your workout program. Well, number one, it's a violation of NCAA, so I can't do that. So I say, well, I'm sorry, I can't do that. It could be considered a special gift or a special, we're not allowed to do it. But the other thing I say is, well, I really question why you would want to just look at what I'm doing, take it, and just apply it to your program. When you're dealing with high school kids, I'm dealing with college kids. You're dealing with children. I'm dealing with grown men for the most part. And so what I'm doing is wholly inappropriate for what you're doing or what you need. And for me to go up to the NFL and look at what, this winter I went to visit Tom Zielinski, the Jacksonville Jaguars, to get some ideas and to visit with him. And for me to just take what he's doing and implement it with my guys would be wholly inappropriate. He's got guys that are 14-year NFL veterans. He's got guys that have been in the league for 6 weeks. What they're doing is inappropriate for what we need, just like these high school coaches. So don't just take a program because you saw that I did it, or because you saw that Devin did it, or because you saw that Joe did it, and say, well, that's what they did at UMass, that's what they did at UNT, because you don't know why we did that. And again, that's why we're going to go back to that why, go back to more talking about general needs. What I want to encourage you to do is to develop a system of training. That's one of the things I really appreciated, about Devin's presentation, because he does have a very strong outline program, system of training. This is the way that we do things. We can move things around within the system to fit what it is that we're trying to do, but there's a system there, and it's based off of what his kids need and what his understanding of training is. And so you have to understand these things before you implement them. And so what I want you to do today, as you read this, whether you work with clients, whether you're working with teams, however it is, develop a system that works best for your kids, your team, your situation, the way you guys play the game, and your coaching style. Because the way I coach might be completely different from the way you coach, and it might not work at all. So we'll talk a little bit about our program. I'm going to give you just, again, a little bit of the insight as it went into how we developed this. Number one, we talked about football performance training. I don't like the term strength and conditioning, because number one, yeah, strength is important, conditioning. I don't really like that word, because we really want to focus more on energy system development. But what we want to do with our kids is really total performance. So, Brady and his crew, they're more athletic performance. I like that because I just work strictly with football. I refer to it as football performance. There's so much more into what we do. What I want our program to be is the perfect marriage between the physical and psychological development, the things that we really spend a lot of time doing, and the technical tactical development that the coaches come up with. And we want that to be a perfect marriage within our program, so that everything we're doing works harmoniously, and that the weight room isn't over here, and the academics is over here, and the football is over here. We need all those things to tie in together. So football performance training for us, this is our definition. It's a quadrennial, multilateral student-athlete preparation program with the singular purpose of developing sport mastery in the game of collegiate football. Okay, now that's just one of those definitions that come up and makes us sound smart. But here's what is important. It's quadrennial. Okay, we want to look at our athlete development program. This is really what the basis of this talk is about, is the multi-year development of our athlete. Okay, we don't look at just what are we doing this winter, what are we doing this summer, what are we doing in the in-season. I want to look at where do I want to get my athlete 4 or 5 years from now, depending on how long I have them, and then work backwards throughout time and say, okay, what do I need to do in this amount of time in order to get them to that place? What do I need to do to get them there? Multilateral, we talked about the 4 aspects there, the technical, tactical, psychological, and physical development. We want to develop those things. Student athlete is extremely important because we're not dealing with professionals. These kids are in school, there's a lot of other things that are going on, and so that's an important part of what we're doing. We have to take that into consideration. And we want to make sure that we're singular in our purpose for what we're doing. We want to develop mastery, sport mastery in the game of collegiate football. So what is sport mastery? Okay, we define sport mastery as the ability to excel at one sport with the least expense of energy and time. And that goes into what we talked about there, physical preparedness, psychological preparedness, technical and tactical preparedness. The next thing I want to talk about is our program pillars, because we've gotten away from having so much of a philosophy, because I think sometimes if you tie yourself into a philosophy and things change, your science changes, your situation changes, you might have to deviate from that. Then you might have to go back and say, well, what we did before wasn't exactly right. And so what I want to do here, what we did with this was come up with some things that regardless of what sport we were working with, regardless of what head coach was in or what they wanted us to do, these are things that, in our opinion, will always stand true. So number one, safety. We want to make sure that everything we do is safe. There's no reason for our athletes to get hurt during the course of training or as a result of our training. Sometimes those things might manifest themselves differently. It might not be the injury that happens in the weight room, that happens out on the football field or on the basketball court, but it might be because of something that we have been doing over the course of an extended period of time. We want to develop mastery of our sport. We've already discussed that. Managing fatigue. That kind of goes back to what we talked about in the last slide, because we're dealing with student athletes, and so there's a lot of different things that go into that. They've got to go to school, they've got to go to study hall, they've got to go to practice, they've got to watch film, they've got to train with us within the NCAA 8 hours a day guidelines. They're going to have a social life somewhere in there, and so there's a lot of different things that we're trying to juggle. That on top of the fact that when guys are taking finals, when practices start, when school is just starting off, there's higher instances of injury. So we've got to make sure that we're balancing all those things out. So we've got to make sure we do a great job managing fatigue. Prevent injury. Devin did a great job discussing that in his presentation, and we won't beat a dead horse with that. Intensive instruction. Our kids will be coached as well or better in our room and on our fields than they will when they step out on their playing field. So we want them to have great instruction when they're with us. It's not just go in the room and lift, go on the field and run. They are going to be coached. And I want them to learn how to be coached so that when they step out on the field, they're better for their individual coaches. Variation within simplicity. This is something that I developed after reading Vince Lombardi, and something that he did. He'd come up with a number of different plays based off of just one look, and a lot of different looks. And what we would do within our program is we want to teach our kids how to do 3 basic things. We want to teach them how to squat, we want to teach them how to press, and we want to teach them how to pull off the deck. Based off of those 3 things, if we can master those 3 basic movement patterns, us as the coaches will change the different training effects that we're trying to elicit. If I want to do an explosive movement, I use a submaximal load, and I move the weight faster. We can use bands, we can use chains, we can box squat. If we want to squat heavy for max upper strength, we can squat heavy. If we want to squat for volume, we can squat for volume. Overhead squat, we overhead. So there's a lot of different things we can do. Same thing with the presses, same thing with the pulls. We want to learn just those basic movements. And based off of that, we want to then vary those movements. The kid, it's just a squat. The kid, it's just a bench. The kid, it's just a pull. Balance development. A lot of problems now with this. Kids get in the mirror mentality. They look in the mirror. They want to have big pecs. They want to have big biceps and then abs ripped up and big quads. But what you don't see in the mirror is the stuff that's going to kill you from an injury standpoint. If we're not addressing the posterior shoulder, we're not addressing low back, glutes, and hamstrings, those things are going to come up as issues later on down the line. So we want to make sure that everything we do is balanced. Everybody today has done an amazing job talking about progressions, and it makes me so happy to hear that. But progressions are so important, and we're going to talk about that later. But we want to make sure that everything we do starts simple, works complex, and our kids are able to master those progressions before we move on to more complicated movements. Team, everything we do, we want to do in a team setting, and then develop a mean-green attitude. With our kids, we want to have a warrior mindset. That's something we talk about all the time. We will be the strongest, most disciplined, best positioned team in Sun Belt Conference and on the field every game day. And we want our kids to believe in their hearts that they're special and elite. They're going to go out on the field and beat people because of things we do the other 8 months out of the year when they're training with us. We have something that we call the 4-way test, and I just like to share this because I share it with the players, I share it with our coaches. In order for us to be successful, these 4 things have to happen. Our coaches have to believe in our players. Our coaches have to believe in our coaches. Our players have to believe in our coaches. And our players have to believe in our players. If those 4 things don't happen, or we have a breakdown there in any way, we're going to struggle being successful. So it's real important that we have that 4-way test. Okay, let's kind of get into the meat of this in the way that our system was developed, because I think that it's important for you guys to understand, again, why we came up with this and where it comes from. As performance coaches, strength coaches, personal trainers, whatever different role you may serve in this field, basically what you're doing is managing and implementing stress. When we do a training session, you're implementing stress on the athlete. And so we have to really understand what stress is. So a couple definitions. Stress is a chemical or emotional factor that causes bodily or mental tension and may be a factor in disease causation. There's 2 types of stress that we've been able to identify: eustress and distress. So eustress is good stress. And that might be, the thing that I always like to think about is when you watch those old videos, like the 1960s videos of the Beatles when they're coming off the plane or they're up on the stage and the girl's up front. She's screaming, going nuts, and all of a sudden passes out. That's eustress. She was so excited to see Ringo up there drumming, and he winked at her, and she just lost it. Eustress. Distress. You failed your test, you crashed your car, your girlfriend or your boyfriend broke up with you, you lost a big game. It doesn't matter. It's all stress. The body doesn't understand the difference. So it's important that we know that and we understand that. Stress has a cumulative effect on the body, and Mark even hit on this in his presentation. The body has one goal at the end of the day, and that's survival. It has to survive and move forward. That being said, the body is going to adapt to change within itself. Back out. About specific means. We use this movement or that movement because you know which movements you use. Physical development of the athlete is essential to develop sport mastery. So until the athlete develops their bodies physically, they're not going to be able to develop mastery of their sport. Until they've learned to master their bodies, they will not be able to master their sport. So we need to strengthen and develop coordination of muscles that articulate the neck, back, shoulders, elbows, wrists, hips, knees, ankles. That's going to help us improve performance and reduce injury, which is really important. And we want to make sure that we utilize means or exercises or training that does not interfere with sport mastery. It's extremely important. And understanding that is important in how you're going to develop your program. So Mark said earlier on that there's really no right or wrong in this thing. If you were to bring up all 121 Division I head strength coaches and we were to all give you a layout of what we do, you'd have 121 different programs up there. Who's right, who's wrong? There is no right or wrong. We understand that in training everything works, but nothing works forever. Training programs, by their very nature, are going to be flawed and incomplete. You will not be able to write a program that covers everything. You were asking about what if I don't have time to do those things. That's true, a huge issue for us. One of my assistants came up to me yesterday when we got done and said, I don't have time to get all this stuff in. I said, well, figure it out, man. It's your program. You got to get some of that stuff out of there. You got to prioritize the right things. You might not have time. And so you're going to have issues in your program that are going to leave things out. If we were to try to hit every little thing that we needed to hit, it might take 4 or 5 hours. And by the time we got to those last little things at the end, there's nothing left and the kids aren't getting anything out of it. So we got to take that into consideration. There's no one best exercise. It means for everything. Joe did a great job talking about tools in the toolbox, right? All of those things. One of those things might work for you. All 8 of those things might work great for you. Maybe none of them work for you. Maybe none of them work for us. But what's important is that you understand that they're tools. Is Joe's presentation good or bad? Is Devin's presentation good or bad? Or Mark's presentation good or bad? No. The reason behind it is because they're all tools that you put in your toolbox. How you use them makes the program good or bad. And if they work for you, even if they go against the things that you've seen today, then it's okay, as long as you're not hurting your kids. You want to make sure that you select training that works for your athletes and for your situation. When we were at University of South Florida, the way that we trained there, we would have 12 racks going across the room. We'd have an intern at every rack who held the cards and coached the individual groups, and we would take our kids through. I got to the University of North Texas, the head guy. It was me and an intern, and that was it for 115 football players. Had to change the way we were doing things. And so it was extremely important that I was able to adapt on the fly and make it so that the program that I was going to implement worked with what we were doing with our kids. This one's real important. Be honest with yourself. A lot of times, and I learned this from Brady when we were together at Utah State, a lot of times, you again, don't check your ego at the door. You say, man, I want my kids to be able to do all these things. We're going to do these plyo jumps, these box jumps, these things. They might be able to do them. Like a lot of stuff that Mark was talking about today, I love all that stuff. Are my kids ready for a lot of that stuff, the high-end plyo stuff? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Does it look cool if they're doing it when coach walks in? Hell yeah, it does. Hey, coach, see what our guys are doing? But what he doesn't see, and what they don't see, and what if I know what I'm doing in the back of my head is keeping me up at night, what's going on in those legs? What's going on in those tendons? What's going on in those joints? Where's that going to show up later? And that's important to remember. Check your ego at the door. We talked about that. Louis Simmons, West Side Barbell, to adapt is not to adapt. Once you've reached the point where your athletes have begun to adapt to your training, they're no longer adapting, we're no longer growing, and our training is becoming effective, so it's important. Everything works. We understand that. This is fun. I'll tell you guys a funny story. I used this next slide in a presentation I was giving on bodyweight training when I was at the University of South Florida. The guy who spoke in front of me did a whole series on physio ball squats, about how he does it. You guys stand on physio ball, and you guys do physio ball squats. I'm not trying to insult anybody. But you guys are doing physio ball squats and demoing how it's great for balance training and everything. But then I said, you don't want to be the guy doing this in your program. So what I always want to talk to people about is, yeah, everything works, but ask yourself, is what we're doing safe? Is what we're doing structurally, meaning orthopedically sound? Is what we're doing accomplishing anything? What's the training effect I'm trying to elicit by doing this? So just like Devin was talking about in his program, there's a reason all those little things, there's 30 different things that he's got going in a given training session, an hour and a half. There's a reason why every one of those things is in there. He shared that with us today. Can you do that with your program? Do I understand what we're doing? And the last part here, can I coach it? Mark hit on that, and it's so important. If you can't coach it, meaning have you done it before? Have you executed it? Do you know how it feels? You want your kids to max effort squat? Your ass has better gotten up underneath some heavy weight and understand what that feels like before you expect your athletes to get up underneath there. And that's extremely important. So make sure that you understand what's going on. Thomas Kerr said this training is efficient if the highest sports result is achieved with the least expensive time and energy. If we could train our kids 30 minutes a day and get them where they need to be, I'd be great with that. I'm not interested in just filling up 2 hours of time because I've got 8 hours a week. If I can do it in 45 minutes, I'd do it in 45 minutes, we'd be done. Right now, the NCAA gives us 8 hours a week. We're at 7 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds right now. We need every minute of that time to make sure that we're getting what we need out of our guys and to teach them the things they need to know. But hopefully we get to a point where we can actually get more with less. We're talking about that a little bit more as we go along. So all those things being said, a couple of things I want to share with you guys. Number one, focus on fundamentals, okay? Basic movement fundamentals are going to be the basis for everything more advanced that you want to do in your program. Yeah, we want to do those plyo jumps. Yeah, we want to do dynamic effort squats with bands. Yeah, we want to do weighted sprints and all those things. But until you get the basic movement patterns down, you're never going to be able to get there. And it's one of the things right now, and I'm going to share this with you as we get more into what we do and how we do it. We are having to go back and reteach basic movement patterns to freshmen as they come in the door because they're not getting it. Why? Because that high school coach who's emailing every Division I strength coach in the country asking for programs is taking those programs and giving them to his high school kids. That program for the kids in Alabama that Scotty Cochran, who just won a national championship with, is now in somebody's high school and they're doing it. Are those kids ready for that? How many of those kids are going to go play Division I football? Probably not a lot of them. And so we really, again, got to come back to what are the fundamentals. Teach technique, emphasize technique, demand technique. Our kids get tired of hearing it, they get tired of hearing it, they get tired of harping on about it. Why do we got to worry about technique so much? Because again, if you want to get to the point where you're doing those band squats and those chain squats and all the cool stuff that you get to do down the road in our program, you better master the basics first before we can get into that. Otherwise, I can't put you under there because it goes back and it violates our very first principle, which is safety. We can't trust you underneath the bar. Don't move on until your athletes have mastered the given techniques. We're going to talk today about how we have a multiple ranking system in our program where guys are actually ranked based off of what their abilities are and their training age in our program is. And until they've mastered the basic techniques, they don't move on. And whether they're seniors or freshmen, they will not move on in our program until they've gotten it. And then the last one, take pride in developing technically proficient, mobile, and healthy athletes. We've got a record wall in our weight room that is there from the old staff, and there's some 700-pound squats on there, and some 550-pound bench presses, and I see people going over there looking at it, pointing at it, and I have zero interest in beating any of those records. I really don't care, because we get to a point in our program where I shut our kids down. You're a 5'8", 185-pound cornerback that squats 520 pounds. I don't need to see you squat 525. There's no need for it. Is that going to make you faster? Is that going to make you better in his role on our football team? No, it's not. It might inflate my ego. I put his name up on the wall, but at the end of the day, risk versus reward, is that really helping us out? It's not. So what can we do? Again, going back to some of the things that Devin was talking about, now we can focus on some different things. Maybe we focus on him using a lighter load and moving it faster and generating more force. And we're talking about that a little bit here. So put it all together. Have a plan. You guys have all heard this. Your mom and dad told you this when you were at school. If you fail to plan, then you can plan to fail. Always go into your program, always go into your off-season, whatever it is, with a great plan. Well thought out, understand what your variables are, go in with a great plan. Start simple. Again, it's something like the credit you learned from Brady. Don't overestimate your athlete's ability. In fact, underestimate it. It's always possible for you to go in and add more training in the back end of what you're doing. If you come in way too hot and you're doing stuff that's off the wall, it's a lot harder to have to try to back off and say, well, guys, yesterday we were doing depth drops from 10 feet. Today, we're going to do some landings off of the 4-inch platform because you guys weren't very good at that. You look like a donkey, and your kids lose faith in you, and it makes it a much harder situation as you walk through. If you have a plan, you go through that, all of a sudden your kids might think you're crazy at first, or your clients might think you're crazy at first, but then what happens is you say, well, remember a year ago when we started this thing, I said this is where you're going to be, look at where you're at now. They go, what about that? Create logical progressions and plan to progress slowly. Kids, I don't know, I've only been doing this for 12 years. I say kids, I'm not really that old, but the athletes we're working with today, they're not all there. You know, it's ADHD or whatever it is, I don't know. But it's a very short attention span, so it's extremely difficult to really get them to lock in on things. And so we've got to take baby steps with everything we're doing. I'm fine with that, as long as we're making the progress that we need to make, but just plan to progress slowly. Base your increases in training load off your athlete's performance. And remember, what I'm talking about here is, just because you're going to increase the training load doesn't necessarily mean that you have to add more weight or you got to do more reps. There's a lot of different ways that you can increase the training load, whether it be time and attention, whether it be by adding accommodating resistance, changing the athlete's body position. You can make the movements harder or more challenging by changing a number of different variables. Yes, sir?
I'm just going to ask, talking about student athlete, ADD, things like that. I mean, with different workout methodologies, like I run into kids expect to have a different workout every day, and you're like, well, you can't deadlift correctly, you can't squat, so we got to teach you. Just curious with you, how you keep them mentally engaged when you're trying to squat them 4 years straight, you know what I mean, doing the same basics with small progressions.